being a student for the first 10 years of your life in Mexico and trying to learn a new language, it's kind of difficult when you don't have the right materials, the right environment, and the right tools to learn it. I remember when I was a kid going to school and trying to learn the language. I was trying really, really hard. But then, for some reason, I couldn't understand the language. I didn't have the right material, I guess. I didn't have the right environment because we were always speaking Spanish. And how are you going to learn a language when you're not practicing the language? So I start asking myself, when am I going to learn English? That's when my nightmare begins, because I was like getting upset because I couldn't learn the language, and I asked myself if I was able to learn the language. So now that I am a teacher, I began questioning myself and looking back to those days, trying to figure out what went wrong, why I couldn't learn the language. So what was the thing that didn't make me learn the language? What was the problem to me? When I was trying to learn the language, I moved from one school to another. And coming up to another school, I started seeing things differently, but not in the good way. Instead, I now couldn't even think about learning the language. I was just not interested in the language anymore. Now that I think as a teacher, I was taking a look at the program that they were using back then, and I identified that they didn't have the right programs, they didn't have the same programs for everybody or for every school in Mexico, or in this case, in my city. So what they didn't have a program where they learn or where they specify what to learn for each kid or for each school, I'm sorry. And I become to ask myself again and see who is behind this, who is in charge of this. So I did my research and CED come up, the Secretariat of Public Education, Secretaría de Educación Pública in Spanish. This is in charge of the learning in Mexico, the programs, the curriculums there are for learning in Mexico. So why they didn't follow a program, why they changed the program from one school to another? How are we going to learn if we don't have the same program for each school? If it varies from one school to another, why don't we follow it? So, like I said, now as a teacher, I start seeing a little bit different things in this program. They said they are going to, or they propose this program so kids learn English, so they develop their learning, so they can be more prepared for the future. But are we actually applying this program? Are they giving us the right tools nowadays? I said we as teachers need to work together, give the right tools, the right environment for those kids that are in necessity, for those kids that want to learn English.